Do you know the top 10 most common serial killer names? Number 10 is Paul, with confirmed 55 known victims in the last 100 years. 18 of them are from Paul John Knowles in the early 1970s. His infectious charisma was his weapon, charming his victims to their unfortunate ends. Brace yourself, it gets worse from here. The name Charles has over 60 victims. Your first thought was probably Charles Manson, one of history's most infamous serial killers. But he was only 9 of the 60 kills. 26 unrelated extra killings did happen by members of his cult, the Manson family. Number 8 is Michael, but not like Michael Myers, he isn't real. Michaels, with their rather average-sounding name, are linked to 95 victims in the last century. The worst Michael is Michael Swango. He was a doctor in the 80s and 90s who brought death instead of healing by injecting poison into his victims, being directly responsible for over 30 deaths. The 7th most common serial killer name is James. It's a name found in many households, meaning one of them is watching right now. Hi, James. The name James connects to over 70 known victims. The king of this awful list of James is James Dale Ritchie in the early 2010s. While only confirmed for 5 brutal murders in Alaska, whispers among investigators suggest James Dale Ritchie's actual kill count might be much, much higher. Have you heard someone's name yet that you wish you had it? No? Let's keep going. With over 50 victims to its name, William comes in 6th. The most infamous and awful of them all is William Bonin. He didn't just murder people, he lured, tortured, sexually assaulted, and took the lives of at least 21 young men in 1979 alone. His method? Using his van to trap unsuspecting hitchhikers. So if you ever wondered why hitchhiking died out, it's because of evil men named William. All of them. The 5th most common name for a serial killer is Robert, responsible for over 90 victims. By far the worst Robert is Robert Pickton, with at least 49 kills in the 1990s. He lured vulnerable women with the promises of money or drugs, only to turn them into his next victims, making his farm a graveyard of lost souls. Number 4 on this list is Dick, better known by the name Richard. This regal-sounding name is tainted with over 85 victims. The biggest dick of them all is Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker. With 13 victims directly to his name in 1984, his whole modus operandi involved breaking into homes, making residents of Los Angeles live in perpetual fear. Like a dick! The 3rd most common serial killer name is straight from the Old Testament. David. Being a biblical name, one might assume some level of godliness to follow, but no. Unfortunately, over 65 victims have been linked to the name David. The most notorious David was David Berkowitz, or as many remember him, the son of Sam. He terrorized New York City in 1976 with his .44 caliber revolver, claiming 6 lives and attributing his actions to demonic influences. Because of course he did. David. This next name I was genuinely shocked by. With a victim count of over 90, the name Gary, of all names, should start to strike fear into you. The worst Gary was Gary Ridgway, known as the infamous Green River Killer, responsible for the deaths of at least 49 women from the 1980s to the early 2000s. His reign of terror left a scar on the communities of the Pacific Northwest that still lingers to this day. Gary did this? And finally, the most common name for a serial killer, with over 110 victims. Let me know if you guessed this right. Drumroll, please. John. This in reality is a numbers game, since John is one of the most common male names in the world, and I don't know if y'all noticed, but every name on this list belonged to a man. The worst John of them all, and arguably the worst serial killer period, John Wayne Gacy. You already likely know the killer clown who was responsible for 33 men's deaths. So if you meet someone with one of these names, run. And if you yourself have one of these names, try your best not to kill anybody.